All right, we're live. Welcome to episode 2, the third episode of WP Crowd. We are talking today about consulting, continuing a conversation from last week. As always, I'm Roy. I've been hosting this thing, and I'm at work today for this podcast. So let's just go through intros really quick, starting with Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm a WordPress developer and consultant in Missouri. And that's all.
Very robust, Steve.
Yes, thank you.
Shelley.
Hi, I'm Shelley Peacock. I'm a WordPress designer and consultant in Middle Tennessee. And that's all.
All right, Nick.
I'm Nick Adams. I'm a website developer and plugin and theme developer from Rochester, New York, and London, Ontario. And you can tweet me at the link that's about to show up on the bottom, I hope. Boom.
Nice. All right. Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate. I am a WordPress consultant and pretty much troubleshooter and anything else that you need done with your WordPress website. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, which is why I talk funny, but you have to overlook that.
I think I'm going to have to start asking you guys questions to answer during the intro. I'll think of one starting next week, but make them a little more interesting. Going into our first segment, WordPress news. Hasn't been too much, actually, over the past couple of weeks, or past week. Last week, the theme review team approved themes to come into the repo that can require the API. Good or bad kind of thing. Definitely get the API out there a little bit more. Hopefully more people start using it and realizing what it can do. WP drama-wise, it's been pretty quiet. That's a good thing. And last but not least, thank you, Kate. Kate is showing off our new segment, Meme of the Week. Our Meme of the Week this week is WP Drama.
Do we get to discuss who to blame?
Canada.
No.
We can
Blame
blame
Canada.
We can blame. We're just going to blame Canada. I agree. I think that's just the way to go.
I disagree. Just saying.
I blame Nick.
Nick, are you even in Canada this week?
No. This week I'm in Connecticut.
Hey, you're not even in Canada. What do you care?
He can't bring any coffee crisp.
Oh, I was just eating some yesterday.
I have stockpiled a stash in the office, and I've hidden them. My boss, who is a friend of ours, mutual friend, found a shop that sells them in Santa Monica, so he brought me a bag full, which I was convinced was drugs at first, because he was just like, "Here, have a paper bag," and I was just like, "What's in there?" And it was just a bunch of coffee crisps. So I've been hiding them and sporadically coming across them, and it surprises me every time. So for the past about week and a half, I've just been like, "Oh my god, I totally forgot I had these," and then I'll have one.
Oh.
And it just makes my day better.
To you, isn't coffee crisp like drugs anyway? So same thing.
Yes, it's the same. Coffee crisp, cocaine, it's all the same.
Well, have you read the ingredients list?
I dare not.
Yeah, I'm just saying. We don't know that cocaine is not in it. And now
Yes.
I'm going to get sued.
I will say this: I've never seen coffee crisp and cocaine in the same place at the same time. So
What was it, like, a story I read about in China? They were putting Viagra in some beverages or spirits. That's what it was. It just said spirits. Yeah, I don't think people knew that was happening, so that must have been interesting.
that'll get your spirits up.
Right?
All right. So what are we talking about today? Oh, we're talking about consulting woes, round two. So last week we were talking about kind of WordPress consulting, and it's a mess. I mean, it's not easy, and as I said last week, I respect anyone who can make a living off of being a consultant. I obviously am not. I work in a office of sorts, which I enjoy, but you know, I've tried it and I failed, so I work for the man now, or the mouse, I guess. But one thing I do have experience with, and I think all of you guys do as well, is scope creep. Let's start with that. Scope creep, for those who don't know, it's when you start a project and basically your client kind of pushes the envelope of what they're asked of or are asking of you. And so they creep into the scope, and you end up doing a lot more than originally kind of planned out for. It causes a lot of issues. And so, how do you guys deal with it? Do you guys have a better definition?
Well, and also you're not going to get paid. That's what comes down. Like, it comes down to that sometimes. You're doing extra work and not getting paid for it. That's the frustrating part.
An example would be if the client asked for something really small. Can we change the color of that button just a little bit? And it's one style sheet change, so it's not a big deal. And you say, sure, no problem. We'll change the color of that button for you. And then it's one more little thing, and it's a third little thing. It really isn't a little thing. They think it is, but it's going to affect not just the style sheet, it's going to affect a lot of other stuff. And then you suddenly have to say, hey, wait a minute, that's going to take several hours, and we're outside the scope of the project. And a lot of times the client gets a little upset at that point and says, well, you did all these other things for me for free. Why are you suddenly wanting to charge me for this one? That's what's happened to me with scope creep before.
Okay, so Kate, how have you dealt with it in the past, or do you preemptively take any measurements to avoid it coming up at all?
What I've had to get really good at is, if even the small little things, like can you change the color of this button for me, is to respond with, sure, that's only going to take a few minutes, but it's technically outside the scope. And I'll let you know, you being the client, any time that you ask for something that's not included in the scope, and if it's going to be an extensive change, then we need to talk about it. I've had to get really proactive about saying that from the beginning, because we can't think of everything. Or sometimes, like the button example, the client looks at it and it's not quite right, but she didn't know that going in. And that's acceptable. I mean, these things happen. But I think that's the biggest thing for me, is just being really proactive about, this is extra. I'm happy to do it for you as a courtesy. If it gets to a point where it's big stuff, then we'll have to talk about additional money in the contract. Does that help at all?
Yeah. Anyone else have any things that you guys do specifically to help scope creep or avoid it?
So one thing I'll say, kind of to follow up on Kate's point about the few minutes scope creeps, is what I do is I use Toggle to keep track of all my time, and I have a label called out of scope, and so I see how they add up, and so I tell people that a couple things here or there probably not going to be charged, but if I end up doing 30 things that are a few minutes or 5 minutes, we're easily talking 150 minutes, and so I look at how it all adds up, and if it adds up to something billable, then I send it to them. If it's only been a couple things, if I spend 5 minutes total, not worth sending a bill for that. But that's how I do it, is I keep track of everything I do that's out of scope, no matter how small, and then see if it's worth billing. But I let people know ahead of time that anything out of scope will possibly be billed.
That's a great idea.
Thanks.
I mean, I guess going back to the button topic or the button
Right.
example, how do you define if some okay, I understand the button needs to change color, so it's kind of like, okay, how many times can you change the color? But when do you draw that line of, okay, well, I've changed the color, now it's not in scope, so to speak?
In that particular example, what happened was that we had a style sheet from the designer with colors listed, and it was a really tight budget, and we had said at the beginning that this budget is based on following your designer's style sheet. And then she wanted the button color changed, just something that, I mean, we're talking about rust and purple and a particular green, and she wanted it aqua. She wanted it something completely out of the design style guide. So in that case, I mean, it was obviously out of scope at that point. If it had been like, I don't like that green, can we make it a little more of a yellow green, that would have been a little bit different. But, so I'm sorry, I'm off track. What was the original question?
Just how to justify, if someone, so you're talking about really a design thing, like, okay, so this
Right,
is
that was a design thing.
So
Yeah.
there's kind of different levels of scope creep then. You're talking about functional scope
Absolutely.
creep, like, hey, can we just add this little piece of functionality in to design scope creep, which is, hey, we've already designed this one way, I've coded it that way, but now I want to make some design changes. So there's
Right.
almost two fronts you have to tackle with scope creep because,
And that's exactly right. And okay, let's talk about function scope creep for a minute. If they want to add something, and it's something that is not difficult to do, again, tell them it's out of scope, but you might want to offer it as a courtesy or as an add-on. One thing I try to do with my clients is always give them something extra. I do an update maintenance service for my clients that's an additional cost. In other words, putting together the website is one cost, maintaining it is obviously a separate cost. But at the end, when we're getting ready to launch a website, I always offer them completely free 3 months of that update maintenance service. There's 30 days included in their contract, but I always extend it to 3 months as kind of a thank you. Here's a little gift at the end of the project. So if you can give them small things, it makes your client, it increases their appreciation for you. And that's why I say if you have something small that they want done, that's a case of install and activate a plugin. Then it's no big deal to go ahead and do it even if it's out of scope. But just tell them that it's out of scope. So in case they then come back and say, oh, well, I really want this really slick JavaScript Ajax-y, sexy effect that I've seen on so-and-so's website, and can't you just sort of slide that into the page for me? Well, it's not quite that easy. And that's the whole thing, is communicating with your client, just letting them know what's going on, letting them know what you're doing, letting them know when you give them something, just let them know that you're doing it as a courtesy. That's what's working well for me. Shelley?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. What was I going to say? It's a fine line, even with the plugins, because WordPress is, huge plugin-based functional thing where you can always there's a plugin for almost everything out there.
Right.
And so it's hard to, I always found it hard to cut that line where it's like, okay, I'll install this plugin for you, even though it's out of scope, I'll install it for you. But then they assume installing a plugin also means dealing with all the energy it takes to make it look right. Because sometimes plugins don't look fantastic right when you install them, right? So they assume that's just part of the plugin, therefore it's part of your services, and you're doing one thing for free to be nice, then people take advantage of that.
That's possible.
And
So-
one thing that I've done a lot lately in the last 3 or 4 months, is really get ratcheted down tight with my contract, because I've learned the hard way exactly what Kate's talking about. And there's been a lot of, well, I want it to do this, then I want it to do that. And I think the more you do in the discovery process, the easier this all is, and then you get it. Because right now I'm working on one, and I've already done one site for her a year ago, and now we're totally redoing it. But I know, based on that project, we've spent lots of time discovering exactly, specifically what she wants, and it will be lined out letter by letter by letter in the original plan, because scope creep can just really take over your life and make you want to get a hairnet and become a lunch lady. I mean, it's out of control.
And Shelley, I'm basically doing that, something very similar these days, except I had a project recently where I think that if I was going to do it again, I would charge to actually go in and do that discovery to figure out what all needed to be added into the scope, so that I could do it bullet point of exactly what I'm going to do,
Yes.
almost knowing the steps I'm going to take when I do it. And the client actually agreed that, had we could have done that on this project. And that's kind of another topic too, is like charging for that discovery, exploratory phase to put together the scope. Some people do, some people don't.
Discovery is a huge thing. When I was working at an agency in Hollywood, we always try to push for a discovery phase before even designing anything. And I think it's super important. I think we do it here a little bit with our UX team. So really just sitting down with the client, looking at what their business needs are, and really hammering out everything before we even touch design. And then we go into design with the client and say, look, this is what we're designing. Let them approve every step of the way, the flows of their users and stuff like that. I think it's super crucial. Of course, not every client you're going to run into has a $50,000 budget to deal with something like that, right? They're not going to want to spend the money when they have $8,000 total for an e-commerce site. So it is super hard to justify doing that discovery, even if you feel like you should be doing it for free almost, just so it reduces your headaches later. But it's still time.
Well, it is vital to do some sort of preliminary review of a website before you even agree to take it on. I don't want to take up too much time, but we've all got horror stories of that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's important to put a lot of that process. I deal with a lot of bloggers and small businesses, and I put that process in their lap and say, I want you to find specifically, and let them be the one to choose specifically what they want, specifically what colors they want, what style they want. Do they want parallax? Do they want a slider? Do they not? And let them own the project in the beginning, so then you can minimize the scope creep. As it starts creeping in, they start finding new stuff, then you go, well, that wasn't originally planned on, but we can work that in, and I'll shoot you an invoice for that. I'll shoot you an invoice for that has become my go-to standby. Okay, when my head starts twitching, I go, okay, I'll shoot you an invoice for that, and a lot of times that stops that creep dead. So.
Yeah, they have the option to have the feature, but they have to pay for it. So that way that they can decide, okay, I'm not, instead of you doing the work for free, they can be the one to say, okay, yeah, I actually don't want to pay for that. So you end up not having to do the work. It just reduces frustration.
Yeah, and just in the last 10 minutes we have here, I know this is ties really closely in with scope creep. We want to talk about boundaries, and so this is almost a whole other conversation, but it ties in so well, because I remember dealing with clients where I get phone calls at 11 o'clock at night, midnight I get an email, and the worst mistake you make is answering that phone call that first time or replying to that email at midnight that first time, because after that first time they just assume, okay, but that was me. I was trying to give the best service I could, so I keep on getting more clients. So how do you justify when to respond to those emails, or do you not? Period. Do you set up a time, business time? Like I know Alex Vasquez. I think he runs a lot on the I only work business hours. If you need to contact me between outside of 9 to 5, either I don't respond to you, or maybe he does premium hourly at that point. What do you guys do? How do you guys deal with the boundaries as far as letting clients know where they can and when they can contact you,
Right.
and all the other boundaries that exist.
Like, I don't answer my phone. That's one thing that I do. I will if it's a scheduled call. Otherwise, I'll let it go to voicemail and get back to him if it's a client. But as far as emails, I have international clients, so I just gave up on. I'll answer emails anytime if I feel like it, and I don't think people take advantage of it. Like, they don't. If I don't respond, I don't feel like they're gonna keep emailing me over and over again. Like, hey, it's midnight. why haven't you answered me? I'll kind of answer it whenever I get around to it, but yeah. So one boundary I definitely have is I don't answer calls.
Well, I think we're smart in our business too to model our businesses after the vendors that we use. And WooCommerce, for example, if you email their support, they may get back to you that day. It might be another day. They say in the immediate response email could be 24 to 48 hours. And I do a lot of I'm like Steve. I will answer my emails because most of the time I'm close to a device that has email on it, and I don't have a problem with that. But I think it's smart to model after the ones that are providing us as a provider.
I definitely turn off the the thing where on my phone where it's just like constantly syncs. I turned that off for Gmail, so I will intentionally check my email when I check it, but I don't just let it constantly buzz me all the time. So that gets crazy.
I think one thing that I do is I don't even have my phone number published on my website. And I do scheduled calls like Steve does. I have no problem with that at all. But I explain on my website why I don't have my phone number listed. And it is this boundary issue. I have had the clients who called at 11 or at midnight or 5 a.m. and wanted to know why I didn't immediately pick up because they had a problem. I had one who wanted me to walk her through on the phone at 2 a.m. because that was the time that she was working on her website. So those kinds of things have taught me that email is the much better solution for me, and it's a lot easier for my clients to get in touch with me through email. If it's something that's not critical and an email comes in at 11 p.m., I'll boomerang it till the next morning. I'll go ahead and boomerang is a thing that you can add to your Gmail and schedule for later sending, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. But I will go ahead and write the email so that it is no longer in my head. I don't have to think about, oh, tomorrow morning I've got to reply to so-and-so because she's got a problem. I just go ahead, reply, and then schedule it to go out at 8 o'clock the next morning. That's something that has been very useful. Boomerang will allow you to send 10 emails a month for free, and then after that it's something small, $3 or $4 a month. I don't remember. That's one solution.
It's a good one. I like that. Any other tips? Nick, you got anything? What do you use for scope? Or sorry, boundaries and stuff?
So for boundaries, I do offer that I will answer the phone. So I have two phone numbers. There's the one that all my clients get, which is only active from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's the one that I'll answer regularly, just to answer questions, anything like that. There is another phone number that you can get for a fee that you can get in touch with me in at any time, and that one you pay by the minute.
So you actually give out, you actually charge for a phone number and then charge them again per minute to use that phone number?
Well, yeah. So what you pay for is you pay for the retainer to get it. So what it does is it costs more than my normal hourly rate, and so what you pay ahead of time, your retainer usually covers like the first 2 hours per month that we agree on, and that's outside of normal business hours. So if you actually use it, it chips away at the retainer, and then you get billed for everything over that as well.
The retainer is only for after business hours, or?
Yeah. Yep. That's the, if you want to be able to reach me 24 hours a day, you can get that number.
Do you use a service to manage that, like manage the time and all that, or do you just do it by hand?
For managing the time?
Yeah, like if a client calls you and it's a 5-minute call, then another 5-minute call, do you manage that, or do you yourself, or do you have a service that manages it through the phone number?
So I just do that myself. Same thing through Toggle, right on the phone. As soon as the call starts, then Toggle is started up, and because I just use the standard Toggle button, and that seems to do it. I mean, people almost never take advantage of that because they don't. When they see what it would cost to get you 24 hours a day, most people immediately are going to, they're going to be like, well, forget it. I can just email you, and you can get back to me tomorrow. So that's pretty much kind of a way of managing that, too, is letting them know that it's probably in their best interest just as much as it is in mine to just, let me get back to you as soon as possible, but not at ridiculous times.
It's not a bad idea. I never thought about doing something like that. I know I've heard of the don't give out a phone number or have a separate phone number for after hours. I do like the idea of charging basically the retainer, so you have like a secret phone number that you can only give out to certain people, kind of like the red phone or the bat phone or something that only certain people have access. Yeah, only certain people have access to.
Yeah, and also what's nice about that is if somebody takes advantage of it, you're making good money. So I'll take your 2 a.m. call to on my next weekend party.
Shelly, I'm not sure if you're trying to talk, but it's coming in pretty bad.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty good conversation. I think overall, to avoid scope creep, I think preemptive measures are always going to be better than handling them after the fact. So I really liked Shelly's just answer with I'll shoot you an invoice. I think that's a really good way of just letting the client know right off the bat, this is not free. I'm not doing this for free. And you can even be nice about it, like, sure, I'll take care of that for you. I'll shoot you an invoice. And boom, they have an invoice and they know what they're getting. But I think preemptively, contracts are always going to be very good. Writing out a scope of work was always a really big thing for me, pinpointing exactly what I'm doing. I think no matter what you do, there's always going to be a gray area of, hey, we designed out a slider. I coded it to be a fading slider, but they really want it to be a left-to-right animation. So it's not really scope creep. It's kind of in that weird gray area. And so sometimes you can charge for that if you want to. Sometimes you can't. The client is just refusing to pay for something like that. But it happens. And I still think preemptive strikes are always better. as far as boundaries go, I think just setting yourself up as a company and saying, okay, here's my business hours and here's when I'm going to talk to you, might actually garner you more respect in the long run anyway, because people are just going to know they can't shove you around and get you anytime they want. They're going to take you and treat you like a business. And that's what you should be treating yourself as, because that's what you are.
Very true.
All right. Any last comments before we shut down? Nope. All right. Well, thank you guys for being on again. Been a good week. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Anyone who's watching, hopefully you guys also have a good week, and see you guys next Wednesday.
Thanks, Roy.
Thanks.
Bye.